Soldier Steve, welcome to the chat show.
Thank you.
This is a special episode because we're going to talk about live play that we both did at Origins.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So you actually umpired at Origins, dispatch umpire, assistant umpire, but really kind of the brains behind the operation in the end because you basically redesigned the whole thing.
Well, I don't know about the whole thing, but
You kind
couple
of did.
parts of it, yeah.
We'll talk a little bit about it, what it's like. Trying to get some excitement about live play. So let's talk about Origins. Origins, you were there for all four games. So
Yeah.
what was it like? Was that your first Origins?
No, I went to Origins last year.
Okay.
Just one day and played one Kriegsspiel game that was umpired by Dr. Sterrett, which
Yep.
is very different experience than most of the games the IKS runs. But it was good. So yeah.
So let's talk about that. So I also I dispatch umpired Dr. Sterrett's version of Kriegsspiel. So Dr. James Sterrett is at the Army Combined CGSC, the Command and General Staff College. And so what he runs is a version of Kriegsspiel that he learned in 1994 from Bill Neeson, who was like one of the original people to revive Kriegsspiel.
Yeah, he was one of the guys who like translated it, right? And they
I think he went
sell it,
back.
I think.
He was the originator of bringing it back,
Okay.
though. There's a couple translations from the 1890s, but basically he's the one who kind of dug it up
Yeah.
and so talk about what it was. You played that one, right?
Yeah.
Talk about what that was like, just to kind of the setup, just to walk the IKS people through it.
Yeah, it was really intense. He
It was
runs
really
2 minute
intense.
turns, and I think he has more umpires than players. And so,
He does.
uh, especially being my first Kriegspiel experience, I was he made me the CIC, and it was three people per side. But it was like 4 hours long of writing as fast as I can. I don't think I'd written that fast since I'd taken tests for school or
since
whatever.
since the eighth grade history test.
Yeah, but it's definitely an adrenaline rush because he has the dispatch umpires coming to you, and he runs 2 minute turns, and it's I don't know,
He runs
maybe
2 minute turns in 2 minutes.
yeah, it's pretty close to
It's
that.
it's real
Maybe just a little
time.
bit longer, but it's very close to that. And there he's strict with the dispatch umpires. If you don't have your orders and dispatches ready when they're there and give you your report, that's it. You missed it.
You're out. That's
Yeah,
it. I mean, you're out in terms of that turn.
right.
And I wanted to highlight. We just started here because I think this is a really interesting point that we act like the IKS is we invented Kriegspiel or that we're the only Kriegspiel. No, there is a lot of Kriegspiel out there. A lot of people know the format. A lot of people run the format. And Dr.
Hmm.
Sterrett would actually tell you he's been running it since 1994. And so the Kriegspiel Society coming up on the radar in the last kind of 4 or 5 years, we're the youngsters on the block. So
Yeah.
super interesting to see that. I have to tell you, I ran it. I was the dispatch umpire. By that time, I was about a year into Kriegspiel. I'd run myself probably 25, 30 games, and that kicked my backside because
Yeah.
keeping up with all that, it was crazy. So the way that it's set up is it basically divides the group in half, and half the people are umpires and half are players. So if there's 10 people, there's 5 umpires and 5 players. That's the way that works.
Hmm.
So and it's not a pretty process. In he sits at the head table, and the dispatch umpire handles all flow. So you send dispatches and orders to the dispatch umpire.
Yeah, he's just
And then
there
I had
resolving the whole time.
resolving the whole time. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no, and so I had a time based movement of these cards. So if you as the CIC wrote a dispatch or an order, and it was not within communication distance on the map within 2 minutes, then I had to put it in a queue for the 4 minute cycle or the 6 minute cycle. And
Yeah.
so as a
That was
dispatch umpire, I'm looking at distances and units, and man, I was hustling.
Yeah, and that was one of my first lessons in Kriegsspiel was about the dispatch time because I didn't really have a good concept of that and how long it's. So I'm writing dispatches, and it's taking like you know uh, 5 to 10 turns, which is only 10 to 20 minutes in game. But when you're sitting there writing, waiting to hear what's going on, it feels like forever. And suddenly I'm
Yeah,
like, oh, okay, there's gonna be like by the time I send a message and get one back, there's gonna be like a 20-minute lag, in game time.
right. It's crazy, and the people are in Doctor Sterrett. We call him Doctor Sterrett because we, as a sign of respect, James is a very nice guy, and
Yeah.
I had we you and I both had a lot of time with him this Origins. He runs a tight ship. There is
Hmm.
no. This is not Marshall on a live Saturday, like an avuncular laughter and joking about dogs. This is a dude that runs a tight ship.
Yeah.
Oh my word! So that was your first Kriegspiel experience, was that?
Yeah. I had been, I'd known about Kriegsspiel for, I don't know, probably 6 to 10 months at that time and had watched
Right.
some AARs on YouTube and stuff, but I hadn't played any games or anything yet.
So talk about you. So how did you? What was your path to this point? So what kind of war games did you
Yeah, I
play?
mean, I
Or
think it
you?
was probably similar to a lot of people in the IKS. Growing up, I played all sorts of war games, everything from Risk and Axis and Allies to computer games like Age of Empires and
Yeah.
even shooters, Call of Duty, whatever. So, um, and then eventually tried D&D and was DMing, and I'd always kind of experimented with. Well, I don't know how much, at least thought experiments with making my own war games. I had trouble dragging my
Sure.
friends into actually playing them, but um, uh, and I'd kind of always been dissatisfied with the lack of fog of war, and then
Hmm.
really with D&D, I was trying to figure out how to have some sort of process for larger scale warfare conflict between kingdoms, and so sort of through researching all that, I somehow stumbled across the IKS website, and so then I kind of hung out there, listened to AARs for a while, and then happened to go to Origins, and I've been playing ever since.
Shocking that first very intense, which just shows that like intensity and stress doesn't drive people away from Kriegspiel.
Yeah, yeah,
I was a cavalry commander in my very first live Kriegsspiel, and I thought my heart was going to leap out of my chest. I couldn't believe how stressed I was
yeah,
trying to figure out what to do, and that was the hook, right? So
yeah, yeah,
I guess that's the secret. But
yeah.
and so coming out of that, we played that one game. We only
Hmm.
ran two last year on successive nights, consecutive nights. So coming out of that, what was your first IKS experience?
Um, let's see. I know there were to start. There were a couple games that I spectated. I just didn't manage to get in as a player.
Right.
Trying to. I don't remember for sure what my very first game as a player was. I know there was a somebody ran a wilderness game late last year that
Probably
was
James. He's good with the.
yeah,
I
but
think he
that
ran
was
a
I don't
wilderness
think that
game.
was that wasn't my very first, but that was early on. I'd maybe played one or two before then, but that's like one of the big early ones I remember. And I was a cavalry commander sent out to for the Union, watch the west flank, and I had I forget if they were. I think they were brigades, but so I had three brigades and like 30 plus miles of river to cover. So I was spread out too much, and it wasn't very effective. But
Yeah.
then I started playing a lot of your games. So that's most of the games that I'm involved with now. I play a few of the other ones, all play by post. It's hard for me to find 4 hours or whatever on a Saturday to play a live game.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're one of the post university, middle of career and family life and all that folks who
Yep.
hanging out for 5 hours on a Saturday, not quite in the cards. I get it. I get it. So
But that's one
what do
great
you
thing
think?
about the play-by-post, so, lets me
Oh,
still play,
yeah,
so.
absolutely. Actually, I was terrified when I first started IKS because I thought it was only live.
Mm,
And I was like, man, I don't have the time for these guys. These guys are intense. And
yeah.
then I play by post. I was shocked. I was like, oh, you can play.
Yeah.
You can actually play and have a life.
Yeah.
So then I proceeded to just do Kriegsspiel full time and not have a life. So that's the irony of it.
Yeah.
What? How did you? How did you, just explain a little bit about your background because you are. I have to compliment you in front of the entire IKS umpire group
Thanks.
because this show is for the active umpires, of which you are now going to become one because you actively umpired Origins. Um, you're like a silent assassin when it comes to planning, and you kind of hang out there, but your plans and your structure is are frighteningly efficient. So,
Thanks.
what where do you think you got that sense for how to organize forces in the way that you do? Because I have to tell you, it's at a very high level. What you the way you put your plans together, and it just
Um,
where do you think you got that?
just I think most of it is the for the planning process is from watching a lot of the other players,
Yeah,
and seeing what I thought was the best, most thoughtful, thorough processes. Um, so yeah, that's most of where it came from. I think, some from probably Melchett. Cactus does a good job with his
yeah.
stuff too. I've definitely copied a little bit of his process, and I'm sure a handful of other people. So, I keep a notebook on
Cactus
all
comes up with
my.
more cactus. I've had a few years of reading this stuff. Cactus comes up with more concepts than I've encountered in my entire career of reading. I mean,
Yeah,
like, where did you get that? He said, "Oh well,
I'm not as creative as him, but at least like some of the
he's
process that
great,
he
right?"
goes through
Yeah.
is good and helpful.
Here's how the Belgians did it in the 16th century. I'm going to adapt it for this game. It's like, dude,
Yeah.
where did that come from? I really enjoy him.
Yeah.
What and then Melchett, of course, is
Hmm.
a terrific player. So that's great. And so you came to Origins. So I put out on the net. Just does anybody want to come to Origins? And you're actually living in Columbus, Ohio,
Yeah.
which is great, which is fantastic because they have a local. Just talk about the city a little bit. And for those of you who've never been to the Greater Columbus Convention Center, it is a hugely intimidating facility. So if I've been to the O2 in London. Um, uh, I've been to I've been to a lot of convention centers. The Greater Columbus Convention Center is a monster. It's a huge facility, and so
Yeah. It's pretty good
Origins
size.
itself, you just get lost in the thing. And so um, Steve showed me a few places to eat outside of the convention center, which is great because there's only so many turkey wraps one person can eat in 5 days.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of good food options around there.
It was great. Um, so Origins at the time. So we got together. So we ran uh, Multica Problem 61,
Hmm.
which is a movement to contact where the contact is oblique. Basically, the two forces create a T. One is traveling east to west, the other is traveling south to north. They don't really know about each other, and then they run into each other, and then they have to react. So that's the structure of that one, division on division. It's the one I ran at Georgetown, so we were going to take it to Origins. So Georgetown was actually my play test for Origins. Then in the Multica Guild, we did a few runs just to make sure we knocked all the rough edges off it.
Hmm.
So let's talk through what did you see in terms of the players, and I thought the level of play was really high for people who really didn't know what we do.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised. Well, I guess there was. I don't know. There was a mix. There was definitely some people. Overall, it was pretty good. There were some people who I think got lucky. I don't know. Uh,
We won't say who,
yeah.
in case this ever sneaks out on the internet.
Yeah.
There might have been
But
a
no,
little of luck.
overall it was pretty good. Yeah, they're the one lucky group. They only planned like half of their route, and then They kind of ran out of time. I don't know, but I was trying
Yeah,
to. That
that's
was the
right.
first one I
That's
was trying to
right.
push them. Like, you guys, you're only halfway to the objective. But
Right.
yeah,
Well, that's a classic beginner's approach. Is you really plan to first contact, but then
hmm,
there's no kind of cultural norm inside your group on what you're going to do next. So you
yeah,
literally you hit the enemy, and then you go to zero. You don't know what to do, and then you're furiously writing dispatches, trying to create a plan on the fly. And it's a pretty bad strategy. So what was interesting to me, so stepping back, Origins, massive show. 98% of it is card games and stuff like Magic the Gathering and Ascension and all these
hmm,
different fantasy games. It's
yeah. A lot
mostly
of short
that.
like party games too. I
Party
think I
games,
saw.
family games, a
Hmm.
lot of LARPing. There was a whole section there where people were hitting each other with foam swords. The whole thing, right? So all that stuff.
Just
Not a lot
one
of
small corner of wargaming.
yeah. One and then but then war gaming in general was one hall where you could play games,
Hmm.
and then the Armchair Dragoons is a an impressive organization of wargamers that it's a combination of board and online. They do tabletop simulator. In fact, right now on a Wednesday night, Achilles, our very own Achilles, is probably on playing one of the great Sam Mustafa games. So they a guy named Tim runs those on he streams them on YouTube on Tabletop Simulator. So it's a terrific group. They have a great relationship with the Game Manufacturers Association who runs Origins, and they have a booth essentially that is the I don't know it's a there's probably 25 30 tables in this whole area. It's not a booth, it's a whole area.
Yeah,
And then on these are staged games of various types to include game designers playtesting their games, which I think is fascinating.
yeah. That was kind of cool.
Like half those games aren't published; they're actually game designers actually playtesting. And then last year, Steve played. I umpired, and then they asked us to come back and do 4 games this year inside this area. And so we took 3 tables of the area right in the center, and they were very kind with their location of it, and we were
Yeah,
able to run 4 Kriegsspiels, one per day for 4 days. We had about 7 to 8 players per. Poor, whether you played or umpired just really depended on the number of people that showed up.
yeah. I think out. So I played one of the games, and then two of the other ones I was gonna play, and then
Right.
last minute another person showed up,
Somebody
and
would
so
just
then
pop up and I'd just
yeah,
say, "You're the umpire," right?
yeah,
And then you offered to umpire the last one very kindly, and I was just about to say, "Okay, let's do it," and then we got a flood of people because I thought it was going
yeah,
to be a small group, so it
yeah,
was just better for us to take a new format that we were trying and do that. So, but the point of all that is that like a live Saturday for the IKS, where you have this moment where you don't know the number of people showing up, it it's fundamental to umpiring to have that mental flexibility and also have your order of battle be flexible enough that you can just kind of flex it as people show up.
yeah, yeah,
And as a new umpire and doing a live Saturday, that is why I only speak from my own experience. I was very stressed about that. And I found with experience now that the flex is built into the system. So if the way we had it organized was is that we had 4 tables and then a floating CIC, which meant that there were actually 6 stations, and that whether those tables had 2 or 1 commander at each of the tables, which is based on the number of people that show up. So one game, I think we had 3, we had 4 people on it. It ended up with 4 people on one team and 3 on the other, basically.
yeah.
So talk through the dispatch cycle. Just talk through what you saw in terms of the dispatch cycle and kind of how we made adjustments as we went.
Yeah,
Excuse
the
me.
um, because we started out with we were just trying to do like our first thought was okay, you would go around and get orders, and then I would start halfway behind you and get
Right.
the dispatches, and then we weren't really sure. Well, do I deliver them with the resolutions, or when exactly should I hand them out? And so it just kind of we were a little unsure at the very start, and we just kind of fell into place, and we worked through it to where I you went and picked up orders and I picked up dispatches at the same time, and then I followed you around for resolution and handed out the dispatches at the same time. Um,
Yeah,
and that seemed to
which
work
actually
pretty well at the
sounds
end.
weird, but it was like um, the cognitive load on keeping track of dispatches was taken off, and so I could just focus on orders, locations, and resolution,
Yeah.
which actually was super helpful.
Hmm.
Because when you also have dispatches and the players, one of the downsides of our AI driven technology society is that people's handwriting has gotten really nobody can handwrite anymore.
Yeah, I was glad I didn't have to read those dispatches. I just had to read
We
the
have
name
to
at the
really
top, who it was to, not the whole thing.
we have to have a panel on how we do orders in the
Yeah.
handwritten environment because it's really interesting how people find it very stressful to write, and there's just no sense of structure in um, whether it was a dispatch or an order, who it was going from and to, all the things that we're quite used to in our orderly Discord world where we're typing on keyboards.
Yeah. Yeah, there were a
If you
few
think
games
back,
where they didn't even write like who it was to or anything on it. He told me, and I was being kind, so I still handed it to the right person, but it didn't have to or from or time. It just had the message, and that was
anything,
it. There was another
anything,
game where the guy who was like writing dispatches like on the bottom of his order, the
right,
card that he had orders on too.
right.
Oh yeah, definitely a wide variety, and it might help to have like if you could get like pre-printed sheets that have like like to from, almost like the old like
The old memo
phone
pad.
yeah, memo pads or whatever. Yeah.
And your innovation, your idea, which was actually brilliant, was get two different color pens. So the red teams and the blue teams would write orders in different colors, and so that when you at least brought them back and you could refer to them. But
Yeah.
then we kind of moved through that and I just started taking verbal orders,
Yeah, well, but
and
then
I
we
had
went
them
back
write it
to,
just to keep them
yeah, you have them
engaged.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the colored pens, that was actually one thing that Dr. Sterrett did at the game that I played last year, and that was
Ah,
something that like immediately I was like, that's a good idea. I need to remember that for live in person games, because once you like see it, it's like, yes, this is a good idea. It's super obvious. We should always do that. It just makes it easier to keep track of, especially the orders where they don't write, whose orders these are, or whatever. They don't tend to write, First
yeah,
Brigade,
exactly.
Eighth
And they
Division,
can
or
kind
whatever.
of,
They just write what they want.
and it doesn't work it doesn't. So as an umpire, if you think about when you're typing on your keyboard at work, assuming you're in an office environment and your boss is standing over your keyboard looking at you, like what your brain does when like you can't remember your password
Yeah.
because someone's staring at you, or some manifestation of time pressure where basic cognitive things that are like super easy when you're on your computer or someone's not staring at you suddenly get really weird. So like if you go to a Starbucks or any retail environment and you can see someone's cognitive gears just lock up when they realize they think you're stressed. And I'm usually pretty chill, but sometimes that you can see them get nervous, and
Hmm.
that happens when you're umpiring, when you know you're like trying to run a 2 minute turn, which is another reason why Dr. Sterrett is an amazing human being. Is like he doesn't feel any of that straight. He just
Yeah.
so anything that structurally keeps everything organized, like a blue pen and a red pen, really helps
Hmm.
because you've only got a certain amount of cognitive horsepower you can put on a lane when there's time pressure. When there's
Yeah.
not time pressure and you got a couple minutes to look up whether the 14th Regiment is assigned to the 5th Brigade and that's Joe or Jane or whatever, that's fine.
Yeah. That's
When we're
along
order,
those same lines, moving to have an umpire map with the mini map with pieces on it instead of trying to write it
yeah,
each time. was another thing that helped reduce the umpire load a bit.
Exactly right. So when we started, I was writing. I had an 8.5 by 11 or A4 if you're in Europe piece of paper that I had printed the map on. So it was a miniature version of the map, and then I would draw on the map, which kept 80% of the units present, but you'd have to redraw every unit all the time. So you would naturally use shorthand. And what got lost in that is things like that one cavalry unit that was, 30 clicks up the road, and the fact that the first brigade sent one of the batteries to the second brigade, and these little details would get lost. And your
Hmm.
idea was to just take a few tokens and represent the cavalry, artillery, and then the command units on that small board so we could track those details, and it worked like a champ. Because I
Yeah,
think by the third game, we were tracking all these disparate cavalry units effectively because you wouldn't forget them because they'd be on the miniature umpire map.
yeah, yep,
But the reason for the miniature map is you don't have to print it out. It doesn't cost you another $30 to print it out. You just basically print it out in black and white on your home printer at whatever nominal cost that is. So it's all about that.
yeah.
Keeping an eye on
Well, and
the,
even if
the tab as
I
well.
mean, you had an extra map, so we could have used the bigger one, but I think
Yeah,
even just having the command tokens to push around, that's just one piece instead of three. You maybe lose a little bit of the granularity of where exactly the pieces are, but in a live game, that's a lot to keep track of too. At the level we were doing, it's more brigade on brigade, and it
yeah.
doesn't matter exactly if where each battalion perfectly is.
So we had all the players keep their own board. So I
Hmm.
would come up and you would hand them the dispatch if you were there, or I'd point to the board and say, "You see enemy here, and your unit has reached this point." So we then they would move the pieces. So we'd say thank you, then we'd walk away, then they would move the pieces, and that actually kept a 4 table resolution down to an average of 1 minute per delivery of reports.
Yeah, our total turn cycle was like 7 or 8 minutes on average, I think, right?
7, 8 minutes. So I actually went through. I threatened to do this, but I didn't get around to it while we were there. I went through and did a breakdown of each turn
Okay.
and looked at the averages. And the way it broke down was 8 minute turns was average across the whole game. Players had to wait. I'm sorry, players had 5 minutes from the report they received to where an order was asked of them. So they had 5 minutes to write an order and a report. I'm sorry, write an order and any dispatches as appropriate. And then they usually had 3 minutes of wait time from the time that they gave their order till they got their next report. But in reality, you were there delivering dispatches and kind of walking around in the middle of the 3 minutes. So they had
Yeah.
no break at all,
Yeah.
which was great. Um, but that means that it's a 6 station exercise, because if we'd have had one more station on that, that would have broken that cycle,
Hmm.
right? So by just walking up to the map and pointing to it, that allowed me to go to 15 seconds per stop, which kept the delivery of the report to 1 minute.
Yeah.
And then when we came back, I was resolving an average of 2 minutes per resolution. So that included all the combat and everything like that.
Hmm.
So that
Yeah,
was
and
how
then
we
if
kept
there were any
the
like
game moving.
occasional mid-game questions, I was able to go answer those so you could keep the resolution flowing too. So it did help
Right.
to
And so what that would look
there
like
another
is
way
I
to
would
help
I would
have an
say to you, "Hey, where did this Jaeger unit go? I can't remember where it is." And then you would go over to the board and look and come back and help correct it.
yeah.
So that little expediting thing kept the flow going. But we kept the hammer down on that the entire. I only kept that level of. So what I would do is I would write when I was resolving. I would write when I was going out to take the orders. I would literally put the time and I like every single step of the turn so we could do this analysis. And only did that for the last 2 games, and we actually kept the hammer down on both of those games
Yeah. Those two
with
were
8 minute
definitely
turns.
faster than the first two, but
Yeah,
it's still, even
because we'd
the
made these
yeah.
improvements.
Yeah. Yep.
So that was a loss. So taking orders in that were all in the same color ink and trying to rewrite the map every time. Actually, I if I would guess it added a couple minutes to the
Yeah,
process.
definitely.
So um, cool. What what would you what do we have left to do on this format? Do you think what improvements do should we make on it to get it going?
Um, I think that I think overall it's really good. It's probably over, 95% of the way there. I think it's just some of the minor things. We could maybe be more strict on like physical player location. Like in the I think it was the last game. There was a little miscommunication on the blue team, and they ended up one of their brigades ended up basically sending a unit to both flanks. So, this guy is commanding units that are what, I don't know, 10,
Yeah, right.
15 kilometers apart. But I don't know, that's with the hour
We didn't
turns.
penalize him for the fact that he personally was probably quite a distance from one of his
Yeah.
regiments.
And with the
Yeah,
hour turns, you can fudge. That was probably beyond the hour turns fudging, but, it's not as strict as 2-minute turns where, okay, well, we got to track exactly how long it takes this dispatch
right.
to get to you. But I don't know. Because I had made notes as we were going, and by the end, I think we'd pretty much addressed everything that I had noticed to take care of.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
like,
I failed
so
to mention that early on. We ran 1 hour game time turns. So even though it was an 8 minute turn cycle with 5 minutes to write the order, it was 1 hour of action. So your infantry would on a road would march 2.5 kilometers as an example.
mhm,
So um, so that allowed a little more looseness in terms of the distance that a dispatch could go, for example.
yeah. So I don't want to say it's perfect because there's always room for improvement, but it's pretty good. I think especially for like a conference format where you're playing with people who are new to Kriegsspiel and don't know all the all the little details and know to send skirmishers out and all the things that people always do in the
Right.
IKS who've been playing for a while. It's a little bit of a simpler, maybe a little bit more abstracted version, but I think it works really well for that. Especially if you're tracking every little thing like that, you can't run 7-minute turns.
Right.
Live.
Or 2 minute resolution. So if you
Yeah,
have
yeah,
any, so the way we did dice was we had an app on the phone, and that just immediately gave us the number versus having to find a dice, pick it up, different color dice, all that stuff, right? So
hmm
it was just an app on the phone. It was a 2D. It was the 2D6 ruse system. Hit the button, gave it gave me a number, and then I would resolve accordingly. So no tokens, no steps of morale, none of the kind of complexity that the online version allows, because there was no spreadsheet or there was no tracking mechanism
yeah.
other than on a piece sheet of paper.
You did
Right?
keep track of casualty numbers on the piece of paper, but I don't
Yeah.
know. I think there were only one, maybe two places where there was enough fighting where you were like, okay, that unit they're done. And I think you probably could have done, you have a general sense of an umpire. They've been beaten bad a couple times. You probably could get away with
Yeah.
not keeping track of casualty numbers even to that low degree if you really wanted to.
You could do a capable, less capable, incapable kind
Yeah,
of
yeah,
approach to it, which is in the end what ends up happening if you
right.
think in terms of casualty. I do the casualty thing just so I can tell the players you've lost 200 here, and I think it
Yeah, and
makes it
that's good
a
for the
little more
players
comfortable to have
to
that. Yeah,
have a little bit more immersion or whatever.
right. I think one of the things you and I did talk about, and I made it in my notes, is that for the AAR to create big, kind of large brigade indicators for the ability to just throw it on the map to talk it through, because the pieces are 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. And when we got back to the map to talk about what had happened, trying to move these little fiddly pieces around and have it be illustrative of what happened was didn't really have the impact. So just having
Yeah.
kind of like 5 or 6 red and 5 or 6 blue big squares to
Yeah, like an
throw on the
inch or
map.
2
Okay, you had a
inches.
brigade here, you
Yeah.
had a brigade there, and you move it around. Just gives that sense of a, a summarized action review.
Yeah, yeah, that would be good.
Would be one thing. Um, there was an interesting thing in live is that because it was a convention, people were coming up while we were hustling. Frankly, like we were head down, and people would be walking up and saying, "Hey, what is this? This is
Yeah.
Kriegsspiel." I read an article about they would have just sit and have a good chin wag about Kriegsspiel, and you're like, dude, I'm keeping on my 2 minute
I
resolutions
know.
here.
I'm trying to, like, balance being friendly and inviting to the game and telling them what's going on versus, like, I gotta go give them their
I
dispatches
got,
right now.
I got a resolution. I'm an umpire, man. I
Yeah.
don't have time for chit chat. This is not tea
Here's when the
time.
next
I'm
game is, come
umpiring.
play. Yeah.
Right. There was one gentleman, God bless him. He was just going to sit and really have a good talk with me. It was
Yeah.
funny, and it worked out great. He was a nice guy. I ended up resolving coming back and talking to him again, so it turned out fine. But I think one of the things I think about is to create a little sheet with even like a QR code to a web page that explains what's going on.
Yeah.
And so you can say,
That's a
"Hey,
good
do the
idea.
QR code. I'll give you an overview, and I'm happy to answer your questions." And that way, it immediately is inviting. It's like,
Or
"Hey,
you could
here's
even
the
do,
info."
like, another one, like, you have those laminated pages you made for the how to
Yeah,
win with the piece description. You can maybe make another one of those, just like an overall of Kriegsspiel. And you can say, "Here, just look at this while I'm resolving," and
yeah. Have a look, and that's exactly right. And that can give the old Jan Heinemann historical with all that the picture of the dice and all that kind of stuff
yeah.
from the old days. So that was one idea, and we definitely need tablecloths that have some sort of swing on them because
Yeah.
they have these silly plastic tablecloths. Even at something as highfalutin as Origins, they have these plastic, uninviting tablecloths. Well, that's a tremendous opportunity to do a little marketing,
Mhm.
even just simple notification. And then I was thinking of some sort of table tent that says "Players Welcome."
Yeah, I
Because if you have
like
a
that
couple
idea.
spots, you want to get
Yeah.
people to walk up and jump in, right?
Yeah, that's I think, it's a good recruiting opportunity, basically.
Right.
People get more experience to it. It's a cool game.
Here's why just thinking about it. Here's why I think conventions matter. Obviously, we're online. We're international society. Most of our gaming will always be online,
Mhm.
either live or play by post. But for every play, we had 21 players over 4 games. Is that right? No, right, 20. Maybe we say 26, 27 players. It's 21 because we had
Yeah,
repeat
there
players.
were a
We had
couple repeat
a couple
players.
players play. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think I count up 21, 22 people have experienced Kriegsspiel, and that's less than a live Saturday, right?
Mhm.
But the number of people that walked up and were talking about it was probably 3x that.
Oh, yeah.
Because everyone that walked through that booth would poke their head in and say, "What's going on here?" And then somebody who wasn't even playing, or you and somebody else would say, "Oh, that's Kriegsspiel," and then they would explain it.
Yeah.
And I saw game designers bringing people from companies up, and they were explaining it and say, "Oh, well, this is how I'm including Kriegsspiel elements and fog of war in my game."
That's
So they're
cool.
using us
Yeah.
as like an example. So I think as a showpiece, it's actually not about the players as much as all the people who see it.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
you
that's
can't
a
get
yeah,
random walk-up people to an open Saturday game. Just not how the internet
right,
works. Yeah.
right. And a lot of people were standing over and like looking at the pieces and all that kind of stuff. So that's a
Yeah.
good thing.
Yeah, especially when you've got cool maps and pieces, it's something people like to look at. Oh, yeah, that looks cool. I wonder what that is, even if they've never heard of it.
Right. So switching gears on it, now that you've had a chance to play in the Dr. James Sterrett stressathon, which I say with love, you've co-umpired 4 of them and really, really contributed mightily to redesigning some key elements that have kept it on track.
Hmm.
What would what do we need to do to get someone like you? And I'm not putting you on the spot, but just kind of thinking as a way to frame the question to actually get your own set and try it. Like, what do we need to do to make this accessible to umpires?
I mean, I think the main thing is the obtaining physical maps and pieces.
Yeah,
That's the biggest barrier. With the ICAS, I think we have a lot of umpires who would be very excited to have a chance to run live games at conventions, but it's there's not that many places to get pieces. Um,
Right.
and they're expensive, especially by the time you figure that you basically need a set, at least a set for each side, and a set for the umpire if you're going to run a full umpire board. The way we did it, you need a few, not a full set for the umpire, the smaller
Right.
one, but and we were running a relatively small division on division. But if you want to run bigger games, after the last year, I was counting up tokens, and I was because I was thinking about making a set, and ultimately I just haven't had the time yet to get around to it. But I was like counting up how many pieces I would need, and I was also looking at like the original pieces where they run like half battalion pieces, so I would have
Right.
been twice as much, and I was like, oh my goodness, it's gonna be like 500 pieces. Um,
On the final version of the game that you and I ran, the fourth one, which I think is we can call it the play tested version,
yeah,
which was smooth, CIC in good position, everything else, adding in CIC command tokens like we talked about.
yeah,
So players get all their units to the battalion level, plus the enemy units in general, plus a little extra friendly units, so they can put out their own units.
hmm
I'm sorry, their colleagues. The CICs have command tokens, so on the mini board they can track their command. So 4 tables of that, 2 CIC tables, and then the umpire table is 334 tokens basically.
yeah,
And so 334 tokens, if you do the math on that, if you do a 10 cent for the Lego, the knockoff Lego 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter, and then you got a penny and a half for the sticky label, you come around $35
yeah,
for a
which is
set.
that's pretty cheap.
Yeah, that's not bad, right?
If you look at like the Photon Cutter Studios, I know is the one place that make it, and it was I don't remember, it was going to
Yeah,
be
that
over a
gets you
hundred
start
dollars or
getting.
something like that.
My son Luke came and was at the conference, and he didn't get a chance to see a Kriegsspiel. We played a game together, and he's an engineer, so we actually looked at 3D printing, and he and I got into this conversation on materials, and he couldn't find anything under 10 cents a piece, which is the same as the Lego. So the Lego is
hmm
actually not a bad deal. And I found some 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter wooden blocks for a penny and a half a piece, but you have to buy 1,500 of them. So I bought a bunch of them. So they're going to come and I'll show everyone those. But
Are
the
you going
point
to
is
hand paint
you
those,
can
or
kind of get
you
a
put use
set put together
stickers?
for about $30, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So $30 for pieces. And then if you take your maps, that I think is where the cost is. So
hmm
if we got umpires to create maps that you could assemble from 8.5 by 11 or A4 sheets, and you could print those out, and then they're going to be a little taped together and a little bit janky, but they're going to be less expensive than the $30 prints that you saw at Origins.
yeah,
When you get those two things together, then you can run one of these. So that's your cost. So $30 plus the variable cost of maps.
yeah. And like you said, if you are a game master for whatever game or an umpire at the conventions, a lot of times they let you in free or very reduced or whatever.
Yeah. And what is true is that all these conventions need content.
hmm
They all absolutely want content. The more games that are set up, the more games that are playable, the more content they have, the more attractive the convention is, the more people they have come to it, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a virtuous cycle. So if you offer to run a Kriegsspiel at one of these regional conventions, it doesn't have to be a big dog like Origins or Gen Con, but a regional convention, assuming you have a good relationship with them and you come off with some politeness, it's highly likely that you'll get a table or two at one of these regional conventions to run a Kriegsspiel. And so if you are in for $30 plus that, and we can also ship you some maps, then we create a little cadre of folks that can go around these conventions. And I think it's a lot of fun. It's a great way to meet people. I was meeting all
Yep.
sorts of folks based on that. They recognized us from doing it, and they come up and say hello. So live Kriegsspiel.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay. Are there any other last thoughts for the umpire audience on running live Kriegsspiels?
Um, I mean, no, I don't think so. Other than, it is a lot of fun. I said I haven't
Yeah.
played on live online, but um, live in person it is very different from play by post with the just even physically having to write cards and everything. It's a lot of fun. I mean, you guys all know that Kriegsspiel's a lot of fun. That's why you're here. But
Yeah.
yeah.
In my opinion, live in person is superior to live online. But that's just my opinion. Um, I think we should remember that the IKS came from live
Hmm.
because the original Marshall and Damon and the group out in Los Angeles was doing Kriegsspiel at Strategicon. That was where this whole thing came from. And then it became an online thing with COVID. And then it remained an online thing as the international crowd began to participate and more innovation happened. But its source was live. So we're back, coming back to the roots. And so it's very much, this is not an outgrowth of the IKS. This is actually where the IKS started, which I think is kind of fun.
Yeah.
And I think we've come up with at least by the fourth game, I think we've come up with a format that worked really well. Certainly with 8 minute turns in person is pretty good outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a great system. Like I said, especially for works really well for convention with new players and everything.
Yeah,
Um,
super.
yeah. And
Soldier
like you said, getting to
Steve,
meet people and everything in
absolutely.
person, it's different than meeting people online. So, that's
And by
good
your
too.
participation, I now know where the Polish place is over at the food shop, so
Yeah.
I can get a pierogi on command. And I feel like I came out ahead on that deal.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Those are good pierogies.
Soldier Steve, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah. Thank
You're
you.
going to join the live umpire or the active umpire ranks because you
Cool.
are an active umpire. It was great having you at Origins, and thanks so much for your help.
Yeah. It's good seeing you there too.